from Fox 5, New York City reparation payments. City moves to address slavery, explainer. And I highly doubt they're going to explain anything, but it doesn't even really matter. It's all nonsense. Clearly another governmental scam. They need more money for a study, right? Criminal illegals are taking over huge parts of New York City. The governor and former governor both hired the same Chinese spy. The police commissioner just stepped down. The mayor of New York City is being investigated, but they need money for a study. And then what? You're going to come back and say, well, this actually doesn't work. Or you're going to come back and say, oh, this does work. It makes perfect sense. And we need $100 million, billion, trillion to give to black people, right? A whole bunch of them don't even know what a computer is.
Young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things.
But they are going to love us for this one. Either way, my name's Eric. This channel is called Report and Opine. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm absolutely begging you.
I'm begging you, please. Come on, please.
It would help me a lot and cost you nothing. But if you wanted to help me a little bit more and spend a tiny bit of money, you would buy my book, New York City 2020, Gotham Unglued, on Amazon.com. That link will be in the description.
Controversy over statues of some historical figures is resurfacing once again.
That's right. The city council weighing a proposal to remove statues of anyone with ties to slavery. Fox 5's Chris Welch.
Wait, okay, pause right there. Anyone with ties to slavery? I mean, that's just vague enough. That could literally mean anybody, right? We all technically have ties to slavery. So what are you actually talking about?
Walks us through some of the fixtures that could become a thing of the past.
Of the 2,500 public sculptures across New York City, how many of them depict someone who had a tie to slavery?
Several, a lot.
That is how the executive director of the city's Public Design Commission answered that.
The executive director of the city's Public Design Commission said, a lot. What is actually happening here?
Very question at a hearing Tuesday morning. The City Council's Committee on Human Rights is considering a slate of bills proposed in June.
The issues that we deal with now, black, white, brown, no one is responsible for creating them, but all of us are responsible for what we give the next generation.
One bill would, quote, consider the impact of slavery and reparations for such injustices, but the one getting the most attention right now concerns public art and school names. It would establish a process for removing certain works of art that depict a person who owned slaves.
Okay, and this is exactly right. Trump was right once again. He said, oh, you're going to get rid of George Washington eventually. Or did he say Thomas Jefferson? I don't know. He said, oh, you guys are going to get rid of everything eventually. And he was 100% correct, because that's exactly what they want to do. Tear down your stuff and then put up their new George Floyd monuments. You know, it's all absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know who they truly think they're going to get on board with this.
Benefited economically from slavery, participated in the trading of slaves.
Wait, hang on. Go back just a couple seconds, because almost everybody, right, benefited. I'm not saying it was perfect, obviously not, but they're just using this blanket, this super wide net to explain anybody. And I mean, right? You told us, the left has told us that the entire country was built on racism and slavery. So that's literally everything. That's all they're doing here. But I want to go back.
Participated in slaves, benefited economically
couple seconds,
from slavery, school names.
Okay.
It would establish a process for removing certain works of art that depict a person who owned slaves, benefited economically from slavery, participated in the trading of slaves, participated in murder or enslavement of indigenous people, or participated in crimes against humanity. By that definition, the nation's first president, George Washington, would fit the bill, as would Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch governor of what was then called New Netherlands, an integral figure in the city.
And Stuytown, right? You're going to rename Stuytown, right? Unless you're a New York local, you probably don't understand. But it's basically its own neighborhood, right? It's a huge apartment complex that actually has pretty nice apartments, but that's not what this is about. There's like 6 or 8 buildings or something, a huge complex in downtown Manhattan called Stuytown. And that now is considered racism.
History. Now, the city has removed works of art in the past. You'll recall last year, the city relocated a statue of Theodore Roosevelt from the Museum of Natural History.
I certainly do remember. Look, I'm not a historian. I don't know much about these historical figures. I do know that you guys are trying to ruin and destroy everything. Why don't you come up with some new figures or build some new monuments in new places, right? You guys love to paint murals and signs and all that stuff. So why are you hell-bent on tearing down things that already existed? And you could say, hey, I don't really like that. Or you could say, hey, I can remember this and move forward, but they just won't do it. And everybody, well, probably everybody doesn't remember, but I certainly remember being at the Teddy Roosevelt statue protesting the removal of that. And of course, I did end up on Tucker Carlson for that stunt.
And this work no longer sits in Central Park, depicting Marion Sims, a doctor who experimented on slaves.
That matter has not been brought in front of the commission.
Really?
As any particular proposal. However, the commission would support increased dialogue about it and participation.
This is crazy, bro. Like, these weird little weasels sitting at, like, dude, how are these people in charge? Maybe they're not in charge. Oh, the Human Rights Commission or whatever. All these made up bureaucracies with these weirdo little weasels who can't even speak from their chest. This is despicable.
In the monuments task force.
The bill is still in its very early stages. You can bet the dialogue will continue. Chris?
Yeah, okay. This is all absolute nonsense, and I guess they're trying as hard as they can to wring out the racism insanity, but it says New York City could soon become the largest city to enact reparations for slavery, but it probably won't. A place that lawmakers say had one of the highest rates of slave ownership in the nation. But why right now? Why in 2024? Why several weeks before the election? Right? You had plenty of time to do this. You could have done this in the Bush administration, Clinton, Obama, obviously. But now you're choosing to pretend you're going to give away more money for slavery. On Thursday, the city council approved legislation to study the city's role in slavery in order to consider reparations to descendants of enslaved people. And there you go. We need more money for a study. If the measure is signed into law, the city would be among the few places actively working towards reparations. What does reparations mean? According to Merriam-Webster, reparation is the act of making amends. This is ridiculous. Lewis says that systemic forms, I always am confused whether it's systemic or systematic. But whatever. The systemic forms of oppression are still impacting people through redlining, environmental racism, and services in predominantly black neighborhoods that are underfunded. This is just all gobbledygook. This is kind of like, was it Pix 11 or another local New York station that ran a story about how, I'm not joking, the heat is racist, and there's not enough trees in Harlem or something. So introduction, I should say, 242A or introduction 279A, sponsored by these weirdos, which of course are just scam artists, and they are going to, I'm sure, get a huge chunk of change if this study is approved. It would also form a truth and reconciliation process to establish historical facts about slavery in the state. The city would then install an informal sign on Wall Street in Manhattan to mark the site of New York's first slave market, which operated from 1711 to 1762. And there you have it again. So of course, we need more money for a study that we may or may not, you're not going to get the money. They're going to get the money. And then they'll say, it doesn't work either way, right? There's so many reasons for this, but every single thing, right? There's environmental racism. There's health racism. There's heat racism. I guess that's environmental. This is all completely despicable. It's just made up, right? You can identify as whatever it is you want. And in this case, I will choose to be, I'm identifying as the structural racism and reparations expert. Then the commission would work with the New York City Commission on Racial Equity to consider the possibility of reparations. How much would reparations cost? A financial impact analysis of the bills estimated the studies would cost $2.5 million. Okay, so the study will only cost $2.5 million. That's going to go to what? Half a dozen people? Maybe a dozen people? What other cities have reparations? Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oh, then they're clearly trying their hardest to revive this. You cannot for one split second. Look, I'm not saying, oh, you just have to forget and this never happened, but you can't just go about your life. And now that we're not dealing with slavery or any of that stuff, you can't just go about your life without constant reminders that this was bad hundreds of years ago. The history of slavery. Oh, wait, hold on, go back. San Francisco approved reparations in February, but the mayor later cut the funds, saying that reparations should instead be carried out by the federal government. Yeah, so it's never going to work, right? Even Kamala Harris, as terrible and despicable as she is, she's going to even realize that there's just not possible, right? You're gonna just print money. You're gonna, ones and zeros all over the place, and then inflation is gonna be even worse. This is crazy. Okay, history of slavery in New York City. For over 200 years, New York City legally sanctioned the enslavement of African and indigenous American people. By the early 1700s, it had one of the highest rates of slave ownership. Ugh. The bill still needs to be signed by Mayor Adams. City Hall signaled his support in a statement calling the legislation another crucial step towards addressing systemic inequalities, fostering reconciliation, and creating more just and equitable future for all New Yorkers. Okay, this is absolutely crazy. And you're going to leave it to this guy? He may sign it. There's reports of him possibly even stepping down because the police commissioner stepped down and the investigations are through the roof. But don't worry about any of that. We're just going to pretend that we are somehow going to come up with million, billion, $1 trillion to give to black people. And they are for sure going to love it because, as we know, they don't even know what a computer is.
Young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is.